Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on Cafe New Canadians. Cafe New Canadians is a web virtual chat that brings you information of importance to newcomers, employment, and other related information. And now Cafe New Canadians is brought to you by New Canadians TV, a web and TV series that brings you information again of importance to newcomers in Canada, information on employment, immigrants, entrepreneurship, and so on. You can watch New Canadians TV on Omni Television and on newcanadians.tv, and also on our YouTube channel on youtube.com/New Canadians. Now, today we are so delighted to host someone on a topic that is of very much importance to you, especially during this time. My name is Gertrude Tumusime, and I am hosting and very delighted to host Veronica Wilson, who is a Canadian immigration lawyer and the founder of Roots Immigration Law. Welcome to the show, Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, and today the topic we're going to be talking about is how COVID-19 has affected and impacted the Canadian immigration process. I can see people joining us from all parts, and you're so welcome. We have people joining from different parts of Canada. We'll get to that much later. I'll tell you where most of our people are joining us from. Yeah, but I would like to invite you to send us questions. If you're joining us on Zoom, please send your questions through the Q&A tab. And if you're joining on YouTube, remember you can put that in the comment section. Type in your questions for Veronica to be answering later on in this webinar. Veronica, let's get to it. Tell us about the whole situation right now going on in the immigration processing and whatever is going on with this COVID-19 that has taken toll on almost everyone in the world.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. The practice of immigration has changed dramatically. It's a lot different than it was just even in the beginning of March. So basically, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, they are the governing body of that oversees immigration and citizenship in Canada. So IRCC has been slowly releasing information about how things are changing and how immigration lawyers such as myself or others can be navigating this immigration system in light of all of these changes. So they've released through the Quarantine Act, there's orders in council that set out the travel guidelines and restrictions and some of the exemptions to those. And that's basically the guiding thing to follow. So what we're doing is seeing who can enter Canada, and it's very few people at the moment, and who can enter must meet one of the exemptions. So then we look at the exemptions and kind of go case by case if they can enter Canada. And then there's people that are already in Canada and they're trying to figure out whether they can remain here. International students, what's happening with their studies. As we know, schools were closing and they're having to study online, and that impacts a lot of different areas as well. So I've had a lot of calls with clients just trying to sort through where they're at in the immigration process, what will happen to their application if it's already submitted, and also figuring out next steps if clients have not yet submitted applications. So there's lots of different areas that are impacted, and I'm happy to be here to discuss what those are and offer some guidance if I can to help navigate everything that's going on in immigration right now.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Can you please just tell us a little bit about in depth those areas and whether for the travel restrictions that you are talking about, if there are any exemptions?
Sure. Yeah, so basically there is Well, let's start with like who can enter Canada. So anyone that's outside of Canada that would want to come in, the borders are basically closed, and there's a few restrictions. So I'm just going to share my screen here. I have a slide that I can bring up. Right. So right now, who can enter Canada? So basically, you're permitted to enter if you're a citizen of Canada, permanent resident, you're registered under Canada's Indian Act, protected person, U.S. citizens, or foreign nationals that are in the U.S. So foreign national is just anyone who is not a Canadian or a permanent resident. So there's a different set of requirements if someone is in the US, regardless of their citizenship. So those are, people can enter if they're coming for an essential reason, and they have been in the US or Canada for at least 14 days before they enter. So there's some exemptions to that 14-day rule, and that sort of covers those that are workers, people that are work in the truck industry or transporting goods. They have a bit more leeway. And then the big one is who can enter Canada. It's a foreign national who is exempt from the travel restrictions. So all of the exemptions were laid out in an order, and I can show this next slide. So I can go through a bit of it generally. Exemptions to the travel restrictions. So people can enter Canada if they have an essential purpose. So within the order, it says that temporary foreign workers can come to Canada. So this means anyone that has a valid work permit, or if they have a work permit approval letter, then they can, they meet one of the travel restrictions, or sorry, one of the travel exemptions, and they can enter Canada. There's some international students. So those are students that already have a valid study permit, or they have an approval letter that was issued before March 18th, and those students are able to enter Canada. Some approved permanent residents. So people who've already had their permanent residence applications approved, they're currently outside of Canada. They received their approval by, maybe they just submit their passport and received visas within their passport, or they have their confirmation of permanent residence documents. If those were received before March 18th, then they meet this exemption and can travel to Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. There's just a couple more with family members as well. This family reunification is something that they want to focus on. They don't want to separate families. Transiting passengers, if you are just have like a stopover in Canada. Also very important that even though you might meet one of these travel exemptions, like you have this study permit, if you are showing a sign or symptom of COVID-19, they will not allow you to enter. So there is like a health check that's happening prior to boarding. Also, the flights and airports, there's closures. So getting the logistics of entering Canada is something that has to be overcome. And probably the biggest takeaway would be anyone seeking entry for optional discretionary purposes. So if they have not normally resided in Canada and are just coming to reside now, there is an extra layer of having to show why your need to come to Canada is essential at this time, because they don't want to encourage everyone to come just because they meet one of these exemptions. There is still this test to show that there is some essential need for them to come.
Okay, thank you so much. When you talk about the people can come in, can they come in immediately, or do they have to wait for some time after the exemption were put in place? Or because we also know it's very hard right now, like you say, the logistics to get an airplane or a ticket to come to Canada. So are they putting in like, you're exempted, but you have to wait a certain time or until things are a little bit better, or you can come immediately as long as you can get a plane to come to Canada?
Yeah, so these orders went into effect March 18th, so they are able to come immediately. They don't want to bar anyone who is needed in Canada for an essential service. So I did list some of the exemptions, but there are a bunch more that are kind of specialized, like especially healthcare workers or anyone that Health Canada deems necessary to help fight COVID-19. So it is immediate if you are able to come. However, there is that barrier of the airport's closed. So I have some clients that have their confirmation of permanent residence, they have their visas, but their airport is not open. They
It's
aren't
not open, so
able
they're working.
to come. Yeah. So I think that from my understanding, if there is something that is truly essential, then the consulate or embassy or government of Canada will help facilitate their entry. Even though these, because not only are the borders closed and the airports closed, there's also the embassies and visa offices have limited processing right now, and they're only doing it for kind of emergency or essential travel, so it would be available. So there's lots of hurdles. So I think that the best way is a case-by-case determination, and if
Okay.
you're able to demonstrate why you need to come now, then, but it's possible.
Okay. Remember, if you're watching us from YouTube, to type in the comment section to submit your questions that Veronica is going to be answering. And if you are joining on Zoom, in the Q&A tab here, right here on Zoom, we'll be taking questions. But right now, Veronica, can you please tell us, so is the government continuing to process applications that were already submitted, or are they even accepting new applications, or do people have to hold off?
So they are still processing applications. It just kind of depends. Like they do have a limited capacity, just like other areas that their staff is limited. They had to adapt to work remotely. So things have slowed down quite a bit, but they are prioritizing what they are deeming to be essential. So things that are currently in process for my clients, I've seen movement on files, which is great, like requests for further documentation and things like that. I think one of the only things they may not be processing and don't want you to actively apply for would be visitor visas or electronic travel authorization, which is something that visa exempt individuals would apply for, kind of like a security clearance. So other than that, they're still accepting applications pretty much across the board. Things that were typically paper applications are moving online. So the process may have changed a little bit, but they're still encouraging people to continue to apply, especially those that are in Canada that may have temporary status, and that status will be expiring soon. They need to remain open to help facilitate those individuals remain in status.
Yes. And do you think this kind of is going to affect the processing time for applications, in terms of if it was supposed to take 6 months to process an express entry application, maybe it will take up to a year or something like that?
Yeah, so it's really hard to say. They do have on their website, so again, IRCC, they have on their website saying that you can look to see what the typical standard processing time is for each type of application, and they have this little like box announcement saying that these times may be impacted by COVID-19. But things like express entry, they are submitted online. They've always been online. Something like that hopefully wouldn't slow down. It just comes to the amount of staff that they have to adjudicate these applications, and whether they have whether they are still maintaining that timeline internally, if they have enough staff to do so. But I think where it comes to maybe sponsorship applications, they're still submitting those by mail. So say a Canadian citizen wants to sponsor their like partner from Ireland, then it's a paper-based application, meaning that application is printed and mailed to, if they're both inside Canada, that's mailed to like Mississauga office. So that's something they're still accepting, couriers are still delivering, and then it just goes to a mail room. And I know that they'll be piling up, and I feel something like that might take a bit longer to process, but I'd like to remain hopeful that it will still continue, because I know a lot of clients are relying on that to be processed quickly and get work permits that are connected to those applications as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And in terms of temporary residents who are in Canada right now, the students, like you talked about the international students, and then we're also talking about the temporary workers or visitors. What has been the biggest impact to them being here? Can they still go on with their work? I know right now it's hard to travel, of course, but can they still run their applications like for work permits and so on?
Yeah, so I can talk about work permits and then students maybe separately.
Yes.
So for work permits, if you are currently in Canada and you have a valid work permit, that just kind of depends on your employer situation. I know a lot of businesses in Canada have closed. There was lists provincial lists advising which are essential services, and those not listed were required to close. So a lot of foreign workers are not able to work right now. They still have valid status in Canada, even though they are not currently working if they have that work permit. There's open work permits and closed work permits. So if you have an open work permit, you're not required to work for any employer. If you have a closed work permit, you can only work for that one employer. So if you are looking to maybe work in a different position, then you would need a new work permit. And that new position would have to be something that is an essential service. And you can also change if your work permit is about to expire and there are no other work permit extension applications available to you, you can change your status to a visitor. So you can submit an application to change to a visitor. And if your work permit is going to expire and you don't submit another application and you are out of status, there is a 90-day restoration period. So you are out of status, but IRCC allows you 90 days to submit an application to either restore your status back to a worker if you have meet one of the requirements for a work permit application, or you can restore back to a visitor. Also, if you do have another work permit avenue and you apply for this new work permit before your current work permit expires and you're currently working in Canada, you will continue to have worker status by virtue of something called implied status. So implied status is really important right now for those workers in Canada impacted by COVID-19. If their employer still needs them, typically they submit another work permit application and they would get that work permit. Either it would take a certain amount of time to get the actual document, or they would travel to the border to receive it. But these typical measures are no longer available. So as long as they submit a new work permit application before their current work permit expires, they can continue to keep working until a decision is made on the new work permit by virtue of implied status. And this also carries forward to visitors and students as well. If a new application is submitted prior to the expiry of your current status, you can maintain valid status in Canada through implied status.
Okay. Remember to send in your questions if you're watching us on Zoom, if you're attending on Zoom in the Q&A section, and on YouTube in the comment section. Please send in those questions. We'll take a question right now from Larry. And Larry wants to know if someone is on a work or student visa and has applied for express entry, but does not get a high score in their English exam, IELTS or CELPIP. And would they have to go home, or what happens to the application?
Sure. So if they're currently in Canada as a student or worker, then once their work permit expires, then they will be out of status and they will either need to change to a visitor. If they don't do that before, then they would be out of status and have to restore, or but if they have this is a common misunderstanding. If you make an express entry profile, like you submitted an express entry profile, is not technically applying for express entry. You just make a profile and you have a certain point score. And then if you don't receive an invitation to apply and you're just in the pool, which I believe this person is, then you have not applied for express entry. So it has no bearing on your temporary or permanent status. You're just in the pool. However, if you are in the pool and you have a higher score and you get an invitation to apply for permanent residence and you are currently working in Canada, if you can submit your permanent resident application before your work permit, I think there's a 3 or 4 month window before your work permit expires, then you can apply for another work permit on the basis of submitting your express entry permanent residence application. But if you are currently in Canada and you're a student or you are a visitor and you just have a profile, that doesn't help with your temporary status. And also, even if you receive an invitation to apply and submit a permanent resident application, that application doesn't bring with it any status in Canada. It's important to note.
Okay.
Should I explain maybe what express entry is in general for?
Yes, that was actually my next question. I wanted you to tell us the other way that express entry has been affected, if there is any.
Sure. So just an overview of what express entry is. So this is the main way for people to become permanent residents in Canada. It's an online application. So it's the main way for economic immigration, those skilled workers that have work experience in Canada or outside of Canada. So this is an application that's completely online, and before you can enter, you have to meet the requirements of either the Canadian experience class, which is minimum of 1 year work experience in Canada. There's also other requirements as well, but that's the main one. And then federal skilled worker, you have at least 1 year, can be inside or outside of Canada in the last 10 years. And then there's a federal skilled trades program. So if you meet the eligibility of those 3 programs, then you can create an express entry profile. This is expressing your interest in wanting to immigrate to Canada on the basis of your skills and education, work experience, language, etc. So once you create an express entry profile, you are placed in a pool with other candidates, and the Canadian government does draws occasionally, and they'll give invitations to apply for permanent residence to people with a certain score. So this is, if you've heard express entry draws, then this is what they're talking about. So they'll give invitations to apply, ITA for short, for people with a certain score. And once you have that invitation, you can now submit a permanent residence application. And at that stage, you provide all of your documents and more information and submit. And that's when you can say, I've applied to express entry, I've submitted a permanent residence application. If you have a work permit that's about to expire and you've submitted that, then you can have the option of a bridging open work permit. From the time of receiving an invitation to apply and submitting your permanent residence application is 60 days. So with COVID-19, there have been some of the steps people have been unable to complete because of some of the closures and restrictions. For example, getting medical exams or police certificates. So if you have your invitation to apply, those are required documents that you need to submit. But if you're unable to provide those by the time your invitation to apply expires, if it's due to COVID-19, you can put in a letter of explanation demonstrating why you're unable to provide and meet this requirement. So they are still continuing to do draws right now, which is good to see. They have been limiting them to certain programs. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the Canadian experience class is one that they tend to be focusing on. So the draws are program specific draws. And we've seen them in Canadian experience class because about 90% of them those applicants are currently inside of Canada, and also provincial nomination program applicants. So the federal government has their own immigration pathway, and then each individual provinces have their own immigration as well. So if you can apply through one of the provinces, you get a nomination certificate, which increases your express entry score. So you'll see that these draws are specific to PNP or provincial nomination applicants as well. So they are continuing to do the draws, but just program specific in light of these current circumstances.
Okay, thank you for that, Veronica. Someone on YouTube sent in a question and they're asking that they got their COPR approval on March 18th. Are they exempted from entry restrictions to Canada?
Okay, so COPR is the confirmation of permanent residence. So congratulations, that's very exciting. So they got it on the exact day that they went. Okay, I'm pretty sure that the language, so you'd want to look at the language within the order. I think it says on or before March 18th. So if it is something, you just have to look at the language and see if it does say on or not. And if it does say you're exempt if you received it on or before, then you would qualify. And if you want to mention where you currently are, then that could help help us decide whether or not you're able to enter Canada now. I guess that would depend on the flights and airport restrictions in your country.
Yes, that question we just covered came from Khalid. So if Khalid, you could send in or tell Veronica where you are, then she could give more information on that. So let's talk about other people, Veronica, who are outside Canada or even in Canada, but they've got their confirmation of permanent residence or who are waiting to get to land. How's that going on right now? How is it being done? Is it postponed? Is it put off completely or until further notice, or is there a way that is going on?
Right. So once you have your confirmation of permanent residence, then you're able to enter. But if your work permit your permanent residence application is approved, and then you have your confirmation of permanent residence. Typically, if you're outside of Canada, you get your permanent residence at the border when you enter. So that's why they're limiting the travel exemption to those that were issued it prior on maybe or prior to March 18th. But for those that are getting it after, they're not able to travel just yet. But if you're inside of Canada, they are issuing confirmation of permanent residence documents now. They're just doing it in a different way. So once you get your confirmation of permanent residence, typically you would have to land, meaning you would sign that document in front of an immigration officer by either going to the border, so something called flag polling, and they are not allowing that to happen now, or you would have a landing interview at one of IRCC's offices, and those are closed now. So what we've seen actually just as of today is that they are doing landing by email, which is kind of exciting. So we are adjusting, facilitating these. I just have this example, actually, one of my clients received, and it just says that, like, congratulating them, you are now a permanent resident. Like, they're just with email, which is great. It's not as exciting as signing a document and being at the border and taking your picture and all that, but they are making things happen. So the email just kind of says that this letter constitutes an official document, and you can use this letter to apply for the benefits that permanent residents would have access to, such as government benefits like healthcare or getting a new SIN number. And then it goes on to explain a bit more of the logistics, but I think that we'll be seeing a lot more of this right now while they sort through everything.
Okay, so with that, that particular person would not have to meet an officer in person at all later on? No?
No, they
So
wouldn't have to send it later on. There's just something with their permanent resident card. They'd have to send some documents and a photo to get your permanent resident card, but they are not encouraging you to go and get a photo taken, because that's putting yourself at risk. And a lot of the places that would have taken the photos are now closed. So
yeah.
kind of goes on to explain those, but this is this is the process that's being put in place in lieu of going to meet an officer. They were it's kind of like a pilot that they're testing. They were thinking about doing it by telephone, but it seems to be email, which is more efficient.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention SIN numbers. So social insurance numbers, this is something else that has been impacting a lot of excuse me, a lot of clients right now. And so once you get a new work permit, you need a social insurance number. Your employer requires that for payroll to pay you. Once you become a permanent resident, your SIN changes. So you have to apply to Service Canada to get a new SIN. So typically before COVID-19, you would go in person and present your documents, and you'd get it on the spot after waiting for a long time. So now those offices are closed. So they are moving it online or by mail, but the last couple times I've checked, the online service is not available. So right now the only option is to get your SIN by mail. And in order to do that, you have to send in your original passport or other ID and your confirmation of permanent resident document, or I guess this email. And that is problematic because you have to send in the originals, and it's taking up to 20 business days. At a client that works in healthcare, and we put in an urgent application, we were told it would be about 5 business days, but it's been about 15 now. So he's with all of those documents. So that's just something to consider. You can speak with your employer about maybe making some sort of arrangement to work without a SIN if they have the ability to do so. But I'm not really able to advise on how any of that works. It's something with Service Canada or discuss with your employer.
Yeah, I guess we just have to keep our eyes up on the internet and the sites to see more about that. We have a question from an anonymous attendee who says that they have a work permit that is linked to their wife's study permit, and both will expire in October 2020. So he asks that, can my boss apply for another work permit for me without the need of an LMIA? And then they provided their NOC.
Okay, so LMIA is the Labor Market Impact Assessment. So this is the typical way for applying for a work permit is to first show that there's no permanent residents or Canadians available to do the position. Whether or not this can be LMIA exempt, providing the NOC. So this is kind of an individual question. It's not really an information, something that I can give like general information about. So if they wanted to contact me, I'm happy to respond to that question. But if they're expiring October 2020, it seems like you have some time to sort out next steps. So I would probably wait to see how all of this pans out. It may not be the best time to renew. I know they do advise that you apply within like 3 or 4 months, but it's not a requirement. You can apply even up to a couple days before October 2020 to get your next temporary status. And you would, depending on the situation, you could have implied status and continue to work or stay as a visitor and student in Canada. So this is something that I'm happy to answer, perhaps if you wanted to contact me, but it's not.
Yes, because he has other questions following that. So if not this, what about this? So the anonymous attendee can get right to you. We'll give more about your contact information at the end of the webinar, but also they should just keep watching to get that. Yes, so Khalid, the gentleman who asked a question earlier, is from the United Arab Emirates. Yes, so if you want to answer that now, or we come back to it later?
So this was the person who has their confirmation of permanent residence.
Yes.
Yeah, so then that would, so he does meet one of the travel exemptions if the language allows for someone who was issued on, and that would just be a matter of whether there is availability to fly. So you can contact the Canadian Embassy in Dubai and maybe explain that you meet this travel exemption, show the document, and see if they have any way to facilitate your entry to Canada. Because I know that they have some charter flights that are available to Canada. They are there for assisting permanent or Canadians to return to Canada, but the flights are happening. So I've had other clients sort of look into flights, and there are some available, but it's not really through public websites. You have to contact the embassies, and they are a bit more expensive. So again, they would also probably want to explain why there is an urgent need to come to Canada now. Perhaps this individual has a job offer and the employer requires him to come. Like, all of that would be helpful. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And we have a question from Siang, who's asking, she gives kind of a scenario that her common law partner is from Japan, and he arrived last May. He extended his tourist visa until this March and planned to go back to Asia to acquire non-criminal records. But the trip was canceled because of COVID-19. He sent another visitor visa extension in March and is in the process. He checked with the Japan embassy, which could help him to get non-criminal record, but for the years he stayed in China, he has to go back to China in person. And the questions are, how many visitor visas could he have extended?
Sure. Yeah. So I can talk about the extension of visitor visas and also getting police certificates. So would this be, the police certificates are required, I'm assuming, for a sponsorship if the common law, the Canadian or permanent resident wants to sponsor that individual. So police certificates, as I mentioned, are a bit difficult to get right now, and they are still allowing you to submit applications without these documents if you can explain why you are not able to obtain these documents, and if it's for reasons due to COVID-19. I'm not sure if it's correct that you have to physically be in China to obtain the police certificate. That information is available online. IRCC has a link for getting police certificates, and I've had clients that have hired lawyers within that country to apply and collect the police certificate. So there may be some other ways, or friends or family members that can get it for you. All of that currently is on hold, but if you're not able to get these documents, that may not be a reason to just not apply for that common law application at all. So that would be something, again, on a case-by-case basis. If they wanted to reach out and contact me, we can discuss whether it's still have the option to submit. In terms of renewing your visitor status, so again, this has to be viewed in light of COVID-19, because you want to stay in Canada to be with your common law partner. Returning home now is difficult, is expensive. It's not essential. It's probably safest to stay where you are. So when you renew your visitor status, this can be done online. And again, if you do it before your current visitor status expires, you can continue on implied status and that will continue until you get a decision. There isn't per se a limit. Like, they don't say you're only allowed to extend a couple times, but every time you apply, it is at the discretion of the visa officer to decide the length of time that they're going to give you to stay. Important things to show the reason why you need to stay, that you have enough funds to support yourself, or if someone else is supporting your stay in Canada, that they can demonstrate that. If you do have plans for application for permanent residence, that could be helpful, but it can't be the only reason why you want to stay. You have to also be a genuine visitor at the same time. So it's showing your temporary intent as well as permanent intent. It's called dual intent. So that's a reason why a lot of visitor applications fail or are refused. So again, you can continue to renew it. I think that the circumstances do allow for genuine reasons to want to extend your status in Canada, and don't let the police certificate stop you from submitting the application. That could hopefully be sorted out, and I'm happy to speak with them.
So yeah, to just get you right, so there is no certain limit that you can apply for an extension this many times?
Not that I'm aware of. Like again, they will most likely be refused if you just keep applying and you don't have like a genuine reason or funds, or they may just renew it but then give you a limited stay for like 1 month. Like I don't see any situation where they just like endlessly renew over and over again without a reason. So it's always at the discretion of the officer.
Okay. And she continues to ask that how could he be eligible to attend free online language courses, which are for people with permanent residence?
So I don't know about that specifically, but I do know that if you want to study in Canada, and if the program of study is less than 6 months and you have like temporary valid status in Canada, then you don't require a study permit to study for something. So if there is a language course, if it is a requirement of whoever is providing that course that you must be permanent resident, that is not something that anyone can assist with. That's their decision to limit that. But if you do find another language course and it's less than 6 months in length, then there's no requirement for a study permit.
Okay. And that is it possible for him to apply for permanent residence without non-criminal records? I know you mentioned that without the police certificate shouldn't stop them from applying, but someone actually brings in another question. Raki asks, what happens in the absence of police certificates?
So these police certificates, it's all case by case. It is a requirement that you do provide it. You should show that you have tried to provide it, the attempts that you have made, whether that's making an application, and then you get a response saying, sorry, like an automatic response, our office is closed. We will process this once once our office reopens. And that's something that you can print and put with your application and show that you have made attempts. If you, it depends on why you are submitting your permanent residence application now. Like, is there some reason why you need to submit it now? If it's a common law application and you submit and then you're eligible for an open work permit, then that would be a good reason to submit without the police certificates. But if you have valid status until October and there's no reason, you don't have an ITA that's going to expire in a couple of weeks, then there's no reason to submit your permanent residence. Then they may not be as open to accepting it without it. But if you do still apply, the reason I said they shouldn't stop you is because IRCC has released saying that they will not refuse any application for someone who was not able to provide a document due to reasons caused by COVID-19. So my recommendation would not just to be to say I tried and I couldn't, but to actually show how you tried. You made the application, here was what it says online, and provide that as kind of evidence to explain that you weren't able to get it.
Okay, thank you so much. And I guess her last question was if he can acquire the police certificate later when everything is back to normal, which I guess you just touched, you just answered that. Yes, so we take a question from Elga. Elga wants to know, do you have any information whether a significant number of international students or people with an open work permit who are unemployed have gone back home? Do you know of such cases?
Not sure I understand the question. So it's an international student and they've
like if there is a significant number of international students or people on an open work permit who have had to go back home because they're unemployed.
So there's no requirement that you need to go back home. Some have chosen to go back home. So if you're an international student, you're still enrolled full-time, you're eligible to work through the summer. So you can stay if you don't have a job, or you have an open work permit holder and you don't have a job, you still have valid status by virtue of that document. So it's not mandatory that you have a job to have that status. Oh, speaking of international students and working, there was an announcement today, which is kind of exciting. So typically international students can work part-time for 20 hours a week for evenings and scheduled breaks. And they announced today that they are sort of releasing that restriction and allowing them to work more than 20 hours a week if they can show that they're providing an essential service. So students that are enrolled in maybe classes in May would only need to, were previously only required to work 20 hours a week. But if those students have a job, say maybe they are nursing or health students and they are providing essential service, or there's food industry, they can work more than 20 hours a week, and that restriction has been lifted. So that's something that we've been waiting to find out, which is good to hear.
Is that just for this period of COVID-19, or is it to go on even after? You know?
Yeah, so this was like actually just released probably about an hour ago. And it says this temporary rule will be in place until August 31st, 2020.
Okay.
And they also provide a link for guidance on essential services during COVID-19 break. So if you aren't certain about whether your job meets that requirement and you're worried about going over the 20 hours a week, you can check that link or contact me and we can kind of determine whether or not you meet it. It just says essential service or function such as healthcare, critical infrastructure, or supply of food or other critical goods.
Okay.
Information is released.
Okay, so can you give some information or some resources where people who want to know more about travel risk, rather not just travel restrictions, but how COVID-19 has impacted immigration, like some resources online or wherever where they can get some information?
Sure, I'm just gonna share my screen again. Sorry, let me try that again. So this screen here, the IRCC COVID-19 Center. So IRCC has created a website where you can get all information about how their services are being impacted by COVID-19. So it provides the travel restrictions, the exemptions. There's a section for students. Something we didn't cover is International Experience Canada, IEC, the working holidays, they're also impacted. So there's information about it there. So that's always kind of a good place to start. I also provided a link for emergency travel assistance for Canadians abroad if there are still Canadians looking to come back, or you need to contact an embassy. They have an emergency line and you can reach out to them for COVID-related things as well. Another great resource is IRCC has something called a web form. So you could find that online, just IRCC web form. And this is one of the main ways to contact them, because before they had a call center that you would call to get information or status on your application, but that's been closed. So if you have anything that you need to provide, if you have a question or an emergency, you meet one of the exemptions, you can contact them through that web form.
Okay. So as we try to wrap up, are there areas that we've not spoken about, but that have been affected, like where programs or applications or anything has been put to a complete stop until further notice?
Maybe the parents and grandparents. This is really unfortunate. There's one of the biggest programs in Canada for immigration is the parents and grandparents sponsorship programs. We have a lot of people that are waiting to bring their parents and grandparents here. The program normally is opened every January. They announced that they will be releasing a new process for this year, and that instructions will be provided in April. And then we received notice a couple of weeks ago saying that this information will be delayed due to COVID-19. So we're still not sure about that. So that's a little bit disheartening. I did have another note of something else to mention. The fees will be increasing. So with immigration applications, there's government processing fees, and they've released with terrible timing that they will be increasing this year, actually April 30th, the fees for economic applications, so express entry or provincial nomination applications. And it's quite a big increase. It's about 50%. So it's $550 for the processing fee for permanent residents, and that's going to be increasing to $825. So if you have, I know, they haven't increased in like 15 years or something like that. So if you have an invitation to apply right now, I know they've been doing the draws. So those in Canada with invitations to apply, if it is possible to submit this application before April 30th, then you'll be saving on that fee as well. They have the right of permanent residence fee is part of that, but that's only increasing by $5. So that's good. For sponsorship applications, it still remains the same, but I believe next year they will be increasing those fees. They have a plan to do that. So just wanted to let people know that as well.
Thank you. And we got a question from YouTube. Somebody got their confirmation of permanent residence and PR on August 22nd. His wife was in Brazil, and she's just going to come on June 6th. She'll be available to get her PR. Since the confirmation of permanent residence for later, or will they send her permanent residence when she's landed in Montreal? That question is a little bit confusing, but I guess what they're trying to ask is, if the wife gets here, will they get their confirmation of their PR when they arrive, when they are landed in Montreal?
So that'll just depend on whether the services are reinstated at the time. If you have booked the flight and it hasn't been canceled yet, that's a good sign. But I can't say because I'm not sure what the state of Montreal will be at that time. I can say that if you have a confirmation of permanent residence, there is an expiry on it. And if you are unable to land by that date, you can contact them through that web form and explain that you need an extension because you are unable to fly into Canada due to the travel restrictions.
Okay. Veronica, do you have any last thoughts and takeaways?
No, I think we covered a lot. I hope I didn't throw out too much there. Hopefully it was a bit helpful. But yeah, if anyone wants to reach out, if they have more individualized questions, I'm happy to speak with you and hopefully find some answers and help you work through this interesting time in immigration.
Thank you so much. And we are so happy to have hosted Veronica Wilson. Thank you so much for that. It was certainly enlightening. We were talking about how COVID-19 has impacted Canadian immigration process. And that was Veronica from Roots Immigration Law. She's the founder of Roots Immigration Law. She's an immigration lawyer. And Veronica can be reached on the email on your screens. You can see that, Veronica at rootsimmigrationlaw.com and rootsimmigrationlaw.com. And remember, Cafe New Canadians is brought to you by New Canadians TV, a web and TV series, and we run on Omni Television. And you can get in touch with us on New Canadians. Follow us on our social media channels, New Canadians on Facebook, New Canadians on Twitter, and you can follow us on New Canadians on Instagram too. And thank you so much. If you're watching us on Zoom, if you're attending on Zoom, please do stay behind and get in touch with us. Tell us about what we can improve and take a small survey. We also have our newsletter, New Canadians newsletter, and you can get it at newcanadians.tv/newsletter. We have information and resources on immigration, settlement, employment, education, and small businesses, among other important issues that affect newcomers in Canada. My name is Gertrude Tumusime. It was a very good chance to have you guys and to host this show. And don't forget that we continue to bring you this virtual series, and we are going to be talking about decoding the Canada employment benefits and taxes during COVID-19 tomorrow, Thursday, 22nd April at 7:30 p.m. Please be sure to tune in and get to know what benefits you are eligible for connected to the COVID-19. And we have other resources for you in terms of contacts, the way you can contact Veronica and get to know more. And it's certainly been a very good experience to share with you guys today. Thank you so much and have a good one. Thank you, Veronica.